Hi guys, here's my tutorial for making these miniature 1/12 scale polymer clay pumpkins. I'm going to show you in a few simple steps how you can create these realistic miniatures. I start by mixing polymer clay in orange and a kind of tanned caramel colour to dull the orange down slightly. So you should have a mix that looks something like this, which I then roll out and form into small balls. These can be any size depending on the scale you're working at, but for 12 scale it's roughly the size of a large grape. So I start by forming the basic indentations in my pumpkin with a sculpting tool. As you can see, this is a process where I kind of work top and bottom, so you should end up with something like this. And if you've been handling it, you can just sit this on something. I have this really handy turntable, and I just go back in and tidy up all of the pieces where I might have lost any detail. So I then start to refine some of these indentations with other tools, detailing tools and even a pin. As you can see, I just work back over the sections until I'm happy and they have a kind of rounded appearance to each segment. I then go back in with my mini brush tool and add some more texture to the skin of the pumpkin. And again, the detailing tools and even a pin are really handy to add finer details like this. So where some of the creases come from the center of the pumpkin, I just refine these. And once again, back in with my pin tool just to add more texture to the skin of the pumpkin. So now for the stalk of your pumpkin, I take a pale brown polymer clay. You may need to mix this from various colors, and I form a kind of long sausage shape, which I pinch out at the end to form a slight kind of lip. And then I use my detailing tool to create ridges in the pumpkin stalk itself. So you can attach this with your detailing tool, and I tend to try and kind of manipulate this and refine some of the detail by twisting it, and as you can see, adding a slight curve to it, because this is how they would naturally grow. So again, once I've finished and that's attached, I go back in and just add any additional detail. So your finished pumpkins should look something like this, and once they're ready to bake, they can have 25 to 30 minutes on 110 degrees C. So once your pumpkins are baked and cooled, you can then start to add layers of colour. I begin with a diluted acrylic paint in a slightly darker burnt umber colour, and this is painted in all of the ridges in my pumpkin. As you can see, I kind of paint it on and then wipe the excess off. So this is really highlighting all of those details in the skin of your pumpkin that you created earlier. So I repeat this process across all of the pumpkins I've made and really highlight all of those indentations. So it should look something like this. I then mix a slightly paler colour with a touch of green and yellow added, and I start to highlight into the top section of the pumpkin. So again, this is really highlighting some of those deeper finishes that you made in your pumpkin skin. As you can see, again, I paint this on and kind of wipe off the excess. So once you've completed that step across all of your pumpkins, I then go in with a detail paintbrush and start to add these very fine blemishes to the outside of my pumpkin skin. As you can see, I've mixed a pale yellow green acrylic paint, and I use a very fine brush to add very tiny details. These are kind of painted on and then almost wiped away just to add very subtle blemishes to the skin. I definitely don't want this to look like my pumpkin has some kind of skin disease. So once I've finished that stage across all my pumpkins, I then repeat this with a very diluted brown or very dark kind of burnt orange colour. And again, as you can see, I'm just adding these very tiny subtle blemishes to the skin of my pumpkin. I then mix this very kind of pistachio green acrylic paint, and this is going to be used to highlight some of the details in the stalk of my pumpkin. So as you can see, I tend to take some of the excess paint off my brush. You don't have to use your fingernail, but I do. And I'm just highlighting all of those high points in the stalk. So where we created those ridges and grooves in the stalk, I'm highlighting all the high points. So not only in the stalk but also where that section of stalk meets the pumpkin. You can also add a green blush to the top of your pumpkin segment where the stalk meets the pumpkin itself. Again, I tend to paint this on and wipe the excess away. So once you've finished painting, the very last detail to add to these pumpkins is these tiny tendrils which join to the stalk section. And I found from growing sweet peas in the summer and also from a passion flower in our garden that they produce these very tiny twisted tendrils which were absolutely perfect to use for these 1/12 scale pumpkins. I tend to just fix these in place with a dab of tacky glue and just join them where the stalk and the pumpkin meet. And I think you'll agree, using something natural is far more convincing than trying to create these in wire or even polymer clay. So that's your pumpkins finished, and you can display them however you like. I've shown mine on this rustic pumpkin cart, which I will be sharing details with in one of my upcoming videos. Well, that's it folks. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if it's inspired you to get creative, then please do hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, Steve PUTNAM Design, for future updates.